So how does the book of Esther open?
Not with Esther, right? It opens, if you didn't read past the first chapter or so, you wouldn't know there was an Esther in it at all. It starts with, the other queen,
Vashti,
who is asked to perform a dance. The king summons her to perform a dance for a party he's throwing, and she politely declines and is, if not beheaded, she is at least dismissed from her role, and that's the opening that Esther then steps into.
I think like differently than Ruth, which sort of has the entire crisis up front. The crisis sort of unfolds slowly in stages in Esther. And what we see at the beginning is an example of how not to maintain one's good graces in court life. And it sort of like in modern reception becomes, it's very funny because, I'm thinking of growing up, dressing up at Purim, the feminist choice was always to dress up as Vashti and not as Esther, as if there was something just particularly heroic about saying no to the king's demand that she just come and perform for him and all of his buddies at the banquet.
Do you not think there's something heroic about it?
Well, one wonders, what the story is doing, right? Like, okay, so you could take that character and be like, well, that's my favorite character, right? But the story itself holds up Esther as an ideal and not Vashti. So Esther is the way to go, according to the story.
So why have Vashti in the story at all? And the story doesn't have to open with the scene of the previous queen,
Well, you need to have an opening. You need to have a job opening.
Fine. Right? So the king said, "I need to find myself a queen. I don't have one." But instead, the Vashti is narrated for her own value to some extent.
I think Vashti is presented as the alternative of. The alternative model of, to say what it is that makes Esther successful, you have to present a counter example of what makes a queen unsuccessful in influencing in court life.
Right. So here I think is the key, because for Esther, it's not about are you a beloved by your royal husband, right? The whole game for Esther is how do you get stuff done in this ridiculous bureaucracy and this absurd space. And it turns out, right, direct confrontation isn't the way. And so then we then get a whole story about how Esther and Mordecai, manipulate the levers of power from within, which again is really it's commentary on how to get by as a Jew in Persia.
This is again sort of could be read as a guide to Jewish life in the diaspora, right? It's interesting, the role that female characters play in this story. Of course, who is the hero that comes out of all of this? It is Mordecai, right?
Isn't it? Is it heroic to be the queen?
It's humiliating, actually. I think that Esther's role is one of, just tolerating humiliation in order, for a greater purpose. And so, to my mind, she is no feminist icon. She's appealing to the king's desire. She's appealing to the king's desire to look good in front of, because that's part of why Vashti was dismissed, right?
Yeah, he made the king look bad.
Yeah, this kind of humiliation cannot be tolerated because it is an upending of expectations of roles, right? The woman is to be humiliated, not the man in this culture, right? And you can't reverse it. And likewise, you see the same kind of reversal with the figures of the relationship between Haman and Mordecai, right? It is the Persian who is supposed to be, is supposed to enact humiliation on the Jew and not the reverse. And so you see the, king, queen, male, female, Jew, and Persian sort of playing against each other in very similar ways.
Yeah. In that sense, we were just saying, like, if Esther's not a feminist icon, is Mordecai, should it be called the Book of Mordecai? Why is this? It's a book about Esther because she's in a sense, the stand-in for diaspora Jews who have to suffer the humiliation. Mm-hmm. What is Mordecai? Wild take. Is Mordecai playing the role of the deity?
Well, I mean, there's something really suggestive about their names.
Yes.
Right? I mean, Esther and Mordecai kind of sound
a lot
like, Marduk and Ishtar.
Yeah.
At the same time, that's, Babylonian gods and not Persian gods. And also, it seems like it's just part of the flavor of the story, and it's really not something, it's not sort of suffused with meaning. It's something very
Sure.
surface about that,
Sure.
as opposed to the way names work in Ruth, which is beneath the surface. But the other thing about Esther's name is that that's not her Hebrew name, right? What's her Hebrew name?
Hadassah.
Yeah. I mean, so she has a kind of dual persona. She has, one to her people and one to the diaspora. And so that's, I think that's also part of, the ambivalence of being a Jew in diasporic life. The other thing has to do with how this is a biblical tale, mm-hmm. And where God is in any of this.
Yeah, I was truly on the tip of my tongue was. So where is God? Is God present here? And what does that say about the context of the thing?
I mean, so part of this is kind of like a rabbinic reading, right? That God is everywhere, right? But God is concealed.
Right. It's essentially that's to read it as an even more explicit version of like the Joseph story, where God doesn't really appear very much, but at the end Joseph is like, well, of course this all happened because God made it happen.
Yeah, which is like sort of what makes Joseph a kind of wisdom tale, right? Where God is in the details, right? Like cause and effect. Mm-hmm. So with Esther, I think.
But that's like Joseph is a tale of like coincidence. There's all kinds of coincidences. He happens to land here. He happens to meet this guy. He happens to say this.
And it's very different in Esther because it's all agency.
Exactly.
Right. And in that sense, it's sort of like, well, in diasporic life, God is nowhere. Why? Because God dwells amongst his people in Jerusalem, right? Like God is concealed because that is not where God's dwelling place is. That may be one way of reading it. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure.
But as I think we said just a few minutes ago, right? I think often we hear diaspora and we think like diaspora after like 70, after the destruction of the Second Temple, where like there was no temple in Jerusalem and diaspora is everybody's in the diaspora. This is like diaspora during the Second Temple period, right? There is a temple. God is in Jerusalem.
Yeah. So
and
God
these
is
people
concealed.
Just aren't.
So when you are elsewhere, God is concealed, which is incidentally what Esther's name means. I conceal myself, right? So it is a little bit heavy-handed there, but I think the way sort of gender functions in this story is a way of talking about the relationship of Jew as other, using the model of like gender to talk about the other.
And so, to that end, that it is then, I mean, it's feminist in that sense, right? Like, maybe not Esther in Esther's person, but in the structure of the book, it is centering essentially a female experience.
Is it? I think it's centering a Jewish experience, and using the kind of anxieties and strategies that are required to live as a subordinate.
But if we took the book out of a Jewish context, and for many, many people it is, can we read it the other way?
I think a lot of people, I will say personally, I don't like the character of Esther, but she does get a lot done.
Okay.
And it might be a kind of message for how do you work in spaces where you are oppressed, right? So it is kind of a story of negotiating oppression.
Right. It's not like a Me Too moment kind of tale. And perhaps, I don't know, I wonder whether this is it's a story that would have resonated more as feminist 2 generations ago, and less so, and maybe less so now. But I don't know, it does feel to me, again, it is one of 2 books that's named for a woman. It is a story that has 2 very prominent, it's just, even these little things are so rare in the Bible, that while I totally hear you, that Esther's not your favorite, and Vashti maybe is your favorite. But
I don't know. I think the story itself is sort of arguing against there are 2 ways to deal with oppression.
Neither of them works particularly well.
Yes.
Right. And in that sense, that's not so distant or so weird.
No, it's very relatable, I
yeah.
think, for some people.
I agree.